Tonight, a special one-hour edition of Nightly News from Uvalde, Texas, site of a horrific elementary school massacre. The small town in shock. 19 children and 2 teachers gunned down in the same classroom. The chilling new details, the warnings the 18-year-old suspect posted on Facebook just minutes before the rampage. Police saying he shot his grandmother, crashed a truck, then entered the school, barricading himself inside a classroom and opening fire with an AR-15 style rifle. The terrifying moments. Did you hear the shooting?
2 times, yes. But then they sounded like bangs, but then our teacher kept saying, no, they're just fireworks.
A tactical team arriving, breaching the door and killing him at the scene. The growing questions, what was the motive? Also tonight, the victims, many just 10 years old or younger. One girl shot while calling 911. 2 cousins among the dead. The teacher killed while shielding her students. What we're learning about the lives lost and the stunning moment.
The next shooting is right now, and you're doing nothing.
Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott's news conference on the shooting interrupted by Beto O'Rourke, the Democrat challenging his re-election bid. O'Rourke escorted out of the room. President Biden today doubling down on demands for tighter gun laws. Will Congress take action? Our team in Uvalde with complete coverage of this Texas tragedy.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, reporting tonight from Uvalde, Texas.
Good evening from this city of sorrow, Uvalde, Texas, a small town that has become yet another landmark for mass murder in America. The bloodshed, the suffering we have seen so many times before. As we come on the air tonight, here's what we know. The gunman killed 19 children here and 2 teachers in yesterday's attack. All of them, we've learned, were inside a single classroom here at Robb Elementary. Police say the 18-year-old attacker barricaded himself by locking the door, then started shooting until law enforcement officers broke in and stopped him. Today, the governor said that just before the shooting, the gunman had warned online that he had shot his grandmother and was going to attack a school. He had bought 2 AR-15 semi-automatic rifles legally just days before. There is still no motive, but there may have been warning signs. Tonight, our teams are covering every part of the story. We'll hear from the president and loved ones of the victims, including one family I spoke with late today. Tonight, amid the unbearable shock and sorrow here, the disbelief that this small Texas town could be the target for this kind of horror. 19 elementary school students, 2 teachers, all gunned down on the last week of school.
I consider this person to have been pure evil.
Officials say the rampage began around 11 a.m. Tuesday when the suspect posted he was going to shoot his 66-year-old grandmother, who he lived with inside this home. She survived, went to a neighbor to call police, while authorities say he took off in her truck, posting, "I shot my grandmother," and around 11:15 a.m., "I'm going to shoot an elementary school." By 11:32, he was at Robb Elementary, where police say he crashed the truck.
There was a brave Consolidated Independent School District resource officer that approached him, engaged him, and at that time, gunfire was not exchanged.
The suspect was then able to go inside the school with a backpack and an AR-15 rifle.
He went down a hallway, turned right, then turned left, and there was 2 classrooms that were adjoining, and that's where the carnage began.
Officials say he locked the door, then opened fire. This man had just brought flowers to his wife, a teacher.
The minute I got in my pickup, I heard a couple of shots, and then immediately the police were there.
The suspect was shot and killed by a responding Border Patrol officer. Police say the suspect is Salvador Ramos, who recently turned 18, the legal age to buy a gun in Texas, and had just bought his weapons. Officials say he had dropped out of Uvalde High School, was unemployed, and had no criminal history. Today, we spoke with the family of 4th grader Aurelia Santos, who was still clutching her teddy bear. Did you hear the shooting?
2 times, yes. They sounded like bangs, but then our teacher kept saying, no, they're just fireworks. So we knew they weren't fireworks, so everyone was panicking. My friend Michael, he was nearby the window where and he saw, so he kept mouthing whenever the teacher went up and someone got shot.
That's a lot for 10-year-olds to deal with. That's a lot for any of us to deal with. How are you doing today?
I'm doing better.
And you got to talk to someone today?
Yeah.
Her parents brought her in for counseling. She knew many of the victims. Aurelia knows some of those kids?
Very, very many. She's grown up with them. We're a small town.
Meanwhile, emotional scenes with parents desperate for news about their kids. As tonight we're learning more about the heartbreaking toll here. 10-year-old Amerie Jo Garza seen beaming as she was named to the honor roll during the school's awards day, just hours before she was gunned down in her classroom. Her grandmother said she was shot as she was calling 911. Among the other victims identified tonight, Annabelle Rodriguez, Eliana Torres, Jose Flores, Javier Lopez, Rogelio Torres, Uzia Garcia, Lexi Rubio, Ellie Garcia, Jacqueline Cesares, Jace Luevanos, and Hyla Seguero, and teachers Irma Garcia and Eva Mireles, a 17-year veteran of Uvalde schools.
I've worked for this district for 30 years and never thought I would be sitting in front of you doing this today. But please pray for our teachers, pray for our community, and we will move forward.
There are new details tonight about the gunman and his background from law enforcement officials and from some of those who knew him. Our Tom Llamas has late details.
Tonight, we're learning more about 18-year-old gunman Salvador Ramos. He grew up in the same town he tore apart, alongside the families whose children he murdered during Tuesday's senseless massacre.
Anyone who shoots his grandmother in the face has to have evil in his heart. But it is far more evil for someone to gun down little kids.
People who knew the shooter describe him as a loner in this small community of about 15,000 people.
Nobody knew him. Nobody was there with him.
He dropped out of a local high school and had worked at a fast food restaurant. He posted photos of guns on social media, but law enforcement says he has no known criminal history and no record of mental illness. Until recently, the shooter lived with his mother and her boyfriend, Juan Manuel Alvarez.
I didn't know he could be capable of doing something like that. It's hard, man.
Alvarez says the gunman was bullied as a child, would often keep to himself, and avoided conversation. He says 2 months ago the teen moved out after getting into a fight with his mother over the Wi-Fi. That's when he moved into this house with his grandparents. His grandfather spoke with reporters today.
Could you give us any insight into his state of mind? When's the last time you spoke to him?
I speak to him daily, but...
You know he had guns in the house?
No, I didn't know.
Those guns were 2 AR-15 rifles, legally purchased shortly after he turned 18. He used one in Tuesday's horrific shooting. The other was found on the ground outside of his grandmother's truck, which he had crashed in a ditch near the school. His family members say they never thought he could do this. I spoke with his Aunt Shelby, who was in disbelief.
Do you have any idea why he flipped?
See, everybody has their own, like I said, their own perspective of everything going on. Nobody knows what everybody holds. Everybody holds things inside. People go through things and nobody understands.
She says she has no idea why he targeted this elementary school.
This shouldn't have happened like this, and I'm sorry to all the families. Like, my heart aches. I have babies. My son goes to the same school. Like, my heart hurts for everyone right now.
Tom, joining us now. You filled in a lot of blanks there, but does anything get us closer to the answer of why, what the motive was?
So, Lester, today we learned the how. The gunman is dead. We may never learn the why. The governor called him a demented person. His family says they never saw this coming. One thing is clear. This man's mind or his heart was poisoned with evil.
All right, Tom Llamas, thank you for that. They were all looking forward to the summer break coming at the end of this week. Children with their whole lives ahead of them and veteran teachers loved by their students. Morgan Chesky has some of their stories tonight.
Tonight, they are the faces breaking hearts nationwide and bringing the small town of Uvalde to its knees. 19 children now identified and 2 beloved teachers gunned down in an elementary school. Authorities confirming all of them were inside a single classroom, led by Irma Garcia and Eva Morales, friends and co-teachers for the past 5 years. Garcia, a Uvalde veteran, molding young minds for the last 23 years. An aunt telling the New York Times she was an avid hiker and the fun of the party. A relative calling Morales a hero, citing law enforcement who told him she was seen using her body to shield her kids from the attacker. The young lives cut short, offering a glimpse of bright futures. Eliana Torres, a student and athlete who was never far from a softball field. There was 4th grader Uzziah Garcia, 3rd grader Annabel Guadalupe Rodriguez, killed in the same classroom as her cousin, 10-year-old Xavier Lopez, a 4th grader, Jackie Cazares, Alicia Ramirez, Rogelio Torres, and Eli Garcia. Many showing up to school Tuesday, dressed to impress, as part of a school-wide Footloose and Fancy Day. And then there's Amarillo Garza, captured here in her last known photo, just hours before the shooting, proud to show off her honor roll certificate. Her grandmother telling the Daily Beast she was shot while trying to call 911. The loss of 10-year-old Jose Flores Jr. prompting his uncle to pen this tribute, writing, "I still can't believe this happened. My heart is broken. I'm going to miss you so much. Rest in paradise, my beautiful angel."
When you meet a family who's just lost a child, what do you even say?
Yes, you don't say almost anything. It's just to embrace them.
Tonight, with a massive investigation underway and questions that may never be answered, a community clings to the faces and names of those loved and lost.
Morgan joins us now from the Reunification Center, where so many parents gathered yesterday. What's the status there now, Morgan?
And Lester, tonight authorities have confirmed that they've contacted every family of the victims involved. So essentially today, this has become a grieving center. Counselors have been on hand all day long to help anyone in this community start the long process of recovery. And we are told these counselors will remain here for the foreseeable future. In the meantime, every school in this district remains closed and graduation has been canceled. Lester.
All right, Morgan Chesky, thank you. I'm joined now by Uvalde's Mayor Don McLaughlin, whose small town has found itself thrust into the national spotlight by this tragedy. Mayor, thank you for being with us. All of us visitors here, we're seeing this community at its lowest moment. This is your home. How is this town doing right now?
This town's broken. I mean, our hearts are broken. Sorry I get choked up with this, because 19 kids shouldn't have died. Shouldn't have happened. Our community is broken. My heart's crushed for these families that lost their kids. I mean, what do you say to them? I mean, I have no words.
And to know that your community, the name of this community, will join a long list of places shattered in much the same way. How do you reconcile that?
You know, all we can do is try to hope to move on from that and get rid of that name. I mean, it will always be a part of the history here. But this is a great community. We have great citizens here. We have a community that will come together and be strong. They'll support these families. And all we can do is take it one day at a time right now. There are no words of comfort that I can say. I wish I could.
We have witnessed a lot of that togetherness, that strength here today. Thank you for talking to us, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. In 60 seconds, much more on the shooting, including new reaction from the president late today. Back in Uvalde, President Biden says he will travel here in the coming days as he calls for tougher gun control laws. And also today, a heated confrontation as tensions ran high. Here's Kristen Welker.
Emotions boiling over in Texas today during a press conference by Texas Governor Greg Abbott and law enforcement. Democrat Beto O'Rourke, who's running against Abbott, barging in to confront him.
This is totally predictable.
Officials with Abbott shouted back at O'Rourke, demanding he leave.
You're out of line and an embarrassment.
Hey, I can't believe you're a sick son of a bitch that would come to a deal like this to make a political issue.
Security escorted O'Rourke outside. Later, O'Rourke defending his actions.
Now is the time to stop the next shooting.
Right after Santa Fe High School was the time to stop the next shooting. Right after El Paso was the time to stop the next shooting.
In June, Governor Abbott signed 7 laws aimed at easing gun restrictions, including one that allows law-abiding Texans 21 or older to carry a handgun in public without a license. Federal law already allows 18-year-olds to buy the type of long gun the shooter used. Abbott today defending loosening restrictions.
There are, quote, real gun laws in Chicago. I hate to say this, but there are more people who were shot every weekend in Chicago than there are in schools in Texas.
The political clash in Texas echoing the national debate over guns. After making an impassioned speech for new gun restrictions overnight, President Biden doubling down today.
I'm just sick and tired. Where's the backbone? Where's the courage to stand up to a very powerful lobby?
But while Democrats control Congress, they do not appear to have the votes to pass new laws right now.
When you have 18-year-olds who can't buy a beer, but they can buy a weapon in the state of Texas, that's a problem. That's an issue of gun ownership.
Many Republicans arguing the answer is more resources for mental health and beefing up security at schools.
I can't assure the American people there's any law we can pass to stop this shooting.
But there has only been inaction when it comes to the issue of mass shootings. In 2004, the federal ban on assault weapons expired. Mr. Biden repeatedly called for it to be reimposed. In 2013, after the Sandy Hook massacre, Congress came close to passing widely supported expanded background checks, but failed to do so amid opposition from Republicans and red state Democrats. And in 2019, the Trump administration banned bump stocks, devices which increase the rate of fire for semi-automatic weapons, a move that had limited impact. Tonight, the Senate's top Democrat said he'll give his colleagues more time to try to find common ground, but acknowledged the chances are slim. Lester.
Still to come, a new shipment of baby formula arrives in the U.S. as Congress demands answers. A major development tonight in another story we have been closely following. A second flight of baby formula from Europe arriving in the U.S. today as executives from top manufacturers were grilled on the ongoing shortage. Jolene Kent has more.
Anger over the formula shortage crisis and recall erupting once again on Capitol Hill today.
You owe an apology to the parents of children who got sick and possibly a couple that have died.
The House Oversight Committee calling executives from 3 major formula manufacturers to face the public, including Abbott. Their Michigan plant was closed in February, and Abbott issued a voluntary recall over contamination concerns after 4 babies got sick, including 2 who died.
We are deeply, deeply sorry.
The company has denied its formula is linked to the illnesses.
What I don't understand is why Abbott didn't immediately address these issues without having to be told to by the FDA or anybody else.
Representative, we prioritize safety and compliance in our plants, and we're committed to doing so and getting better coming out of this event.
Madam Chairman, for the record, I'm not satisfied with the witnesses' answers.
FDA Commissioner Robert Califf detailing disturbing conditions inside the Abbott facility.
Let's say you had a next-door neighbor who had leaks in the roof. They didn't wash their hands. They had bacteria growing all over the kitchen. You walked in and there was standing water on the counters and the floor. You probably wouldn't want your infant eating in that kitchen.
The commissioner testified that Abbott has repaired the leaking roof and replaced the floor. The FDA also facing blowback for acting too slowly after receiving a whistleblower complaint last October. But the plant didn't close till months later.
How does that happen? How can that possibly happen?
Well, let me just point out that the complaint was received. It was logged in right away. There were some medical issues that delayed it. We're on record as saying it took too long.
The outrage spilling over as a second plane carrying emergency formula landed at Dulles International Airport, carrying 114 pallets of Gerber Good Start hypoallergenic formula to be trucked to Pennsylvania, ready to hit store shelves this weekend.
I'm here today to say to parents, you aren't alone.
And Abbott says it plans to restart production at that closed plant on June 4th, with formula hitting shelves around June 20th. Lester?
All right, Jolene, Ken, thank you. When we come back, some reflections on where we are after this latest heartbreaking chapter in American life. Back now from Uvalde, Texas, at the scene of unfathomable grief. Tonight, families torn apart and what has become all too familiar. That there should be so many that anyone has to track them is a statement in and of itself. The Gun Violence Archive is an independent organization that tracks mass shootings in the U.S., and it says the one here in Uvalde, Texas, was the 213th of the year. Education Week, the journalism site covering all things K through 12, says the shooting at Robb Elementary was the 27th school shooting this year. Some will try to rank these crimes, which was the deadliest, which was the most heinous. But when the shooting takes your loved one, your child, that shooting is the worst one. And so here we are on location at the latest scene of human wreckage. And we are at that point of the program where we try to find the words of compassion to somehow bring sense to the senseless. Tonight, after the 213th mass shooting of the year, after the 27th school shooting of the year, we simply have no words. There is only pain. And so we are going to take a moment with you now in silence to acknowledge the pain, for we must not grow numb. We'll take a short break. For many stations across the country, our coverage will continue live from Uvalde, Texas. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Good night.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, reporting tonight from Uvalde, Texas.
Welcome back to our continuing nightly news coverage of the mass shooting here in Uvalde, Texas. And tonight they're holding a prayer vigil here for the victims of yesterday's attack at Robb Elementary School. The 19 children and 2 teachers who were shot to death by an 18-year-old gunman. Tonight we're learning more about the shooter, how he purchased 2 AR-15 style rifles in recent days, how he had warned in online messages just before the assault that he had shot his grandmother and was going to attack a school, and as he carried out the massacre in a classroom, how law enforcement officers were finally able to break in and stop him. Gabe Gutierrez has their stories tonight.
Tonight, the law enforcement officers who stopped the gunman in Uvalde are being hailed as heroes.
You don't mess with our kids.
One of them, an unidentified agent with Customs and Border Protection, who fired the fatal shot. The agent was wounded, but survived.
Law enforcement officials did what they do. They showed amazing courage by running toward gunfire for the singular purpose of trying to save lives.
The gunman, armed with a rifle, was first confronted by a school district police officer outside the school. He was shot and wounded. Then the gunman barricaded himself inside a classroom.
They breached the classroom door, they went in, they engaged Ramos and killed him at the scene.
Authorities say the shooter wore a tactical vest with no armor plate inside. The ATF says the shooter used it to carry at least 7 30-round magazines.
We're reeling. It's hard to put into words.
Vince DiPiazza is Uvalde's city manager.
We had a school full of kids. They had that much to deal with, too. Figure out really what was going on.
Across the U.S., gunmen have become increasingly protected during rampages. At least 21 mass shooters over the last 4 decades have worn some kind of body armor. Among them, the killers in Aurora, Colorado in 2012, San Bernardino, California in 2015, and Santa Fe, Texas in 2018. In Buffalo this month, a bullet fired by a security guard hit the shooter, but that did not stop the carnage. Today, that retired officer, Aaron Salter Jr., was laid to rest.
On one of the darkest days in the history of Buffalo, he made a choice to stand tall. He gave all that he had for all that he believed in, protecting and saving lives.
It's illegal under federal law for a convicted felon to buy body armor, but other than that, there are few restrictions. Policing experts say law enforcement officers are increasingly outgunned.
This is not a unique tragedy, it is the real tragedy. We're another town on a long list, and a growing list, apparently.
Gabe, relatives of law enforcement also lost their lives in this tragedy.
Yes, that's right, Lester. Authorities say that a school district police officer lost his wife in the shooting. And the governor says that a sheriff's deputy lost a child. Devastating on so many levels, Lester.
All right, Gabe, thank you. Tonight, so many families here are suffering the agonizing loss of their loved ones. Late today, I spoke with the family of one of those children in the school, Ariana Santos, who was in the 4th grade but made it out alive.
The lockdown drills are basically for if anyone who's armed or anything gets into the school and tries to hurt us, we have to stay quiet so they don't know where we are.
Is that what you tried to do yesterday and your classmates?
Yes. We were stuck in a room with some kids, and the kids, they kept talking and talking, so we were afraid that we were going to get caught. So, yeah.
If your recess hadn't been scheduled earlier, you would have been nearby where this was happening?
Yes.
What was it like to see your parents for the first time after this?
I saw my mom getting off the bus, and as soon as we got inside, I didn't know where any other 4th graders was because it was only 2 classes of 4th graders. We couldn't find anyone. My friend Leah, her cousin, she didn't know where he was, so she started crying.
She has 3 cousins who were supposed to be in the classrooms and didn't go into school that day.
Fate.
Yeah, that's literally what we called it.
The governor here says the shooting is a sign that Texas and the nation need better access to mental health treatment. And he cited crime rates in major cities as proof that more gun control isn't the answer. Pete Williams joins us now. Pete, what do we know about the shooter's access to guns?
Well, Lester, law enforcement officials say that Salvador Ramos bought 2 AR-15 style weapons and several hundreds of rounds of ammunition just last week. That's within a few days after he turned 18. He also posted a photo of the weapons on social media. We estimate the total cost at around $3,500. Each rifle has a 30-round magazine or clip. And when he entered the school yesterday, investigators say he was carrying one of them. The other was found on the ground near the pickup truck that he was driving when he crashed it into a ditch. Under federal law, the minimum age to buy a handgun is 21, but the minimum age to buy a long gun, that means a shotgun, a rifle, or one of these AR-15 style weapons, is 18. So Texas authorities say Ramos bought these weapons legally. The Texas Governor Greg Abbott was asked today about that.
The ability of an 18-year-old to buy a long gun has been in place in the state of Texas for more than 60 years. And think about during the time over the course of that 60 years, we have not had episodes like this.
A federal law passed in 1968 set the minimum age for buying a long gun at 18. And advocates of gun control say back then that meant hunting rifles. AR-15 type weapons didn't really become popular until the late 80s, early 90s. And so they say it makes no sense to allow the sale of those weapons at 18, but not handguns until 21. But Governor Abbott said today California, New York, and Chicago all have strict gun laws, but still have a problem with gun violence. Lester?
Coming out of the soundbite.
Yeah. And Pete, how likely is it Congress would raise these limits on buying guns?
Well, in the current political climate, it seems very unlikely because these are among the most popular weapons. 1 out of every 5 firearms sold in America today is one of these weapons, Lester.
Pete Williams, thank you. I want to show you now a stunning moment today during a news conference by Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott. Democrat Beto O'Rourke, who's running against Abbott in the upcoming governor's election here, burst in and accused him of inaction.
This is totally predictable when you...
Sir, you're out of line. Sir, you're out of line. Sir, you're out of line. Please leave this this auditorium. I can't believe you're a sick son of a that would come to a deal like this to make a political issue. It's only like you. Why don't you get out of here?
O'Rourke was escorted from the room. He's also called on Abbott to cancel a scheduled appearance at this weekend's NRA convention in Houston. O'Rourke and many fellow Democrats are calling for stricter gun laws in the wake of the Texas shooting. But as we've seen after tragedies like this in the past, the chances of it happening in Washington are very slim. Garrett Haake joins us now. Garrett, what is the political reality here in the prospect for Congress to act?
Lester, this is an issue which for 10 years Congress has consistently failed to do anything but fail. Democrats would like to see perhaps a stronger background check bill put in place. There was one negotiated after Sandy Hook. It didn't have the Republican votes then. It doesn't have the Republican votes now. Republicans, for their part, would like to see schools be hardened. They'd like to see more of a focus on mental health. Democrats say that's beside the point. You have to focus on the guns. Chris Murphy of Connecticut's been the lead negotiator for Democrats on this. He laid out the stakes today.
Unless you're going to put a brigade outside of every single elementary school, outside of every single church, outside of every single movie theater, outside of every single shopping mall in this country, the solution is not going to be arming every single inch of every single school. The solution is going to be making sure that these kids whose brains are breaking don't have access to these weapons of mass destruction.
Lester, the sweet spot here may be these emergency protection orders, red flag laws. There are some that have been passed in Republican states, including by Republican governors who are now in the Senate. They may be the key votes to get something done here on gun violence. It's not everything Democrats want, but it would be a start.
All right, Garrett, thank you. Appreciate that. The massacre here is resonating not just across the U.S., but across the world. Tom Costello now has that story.
Verzweifelte Eltern vor der Schule.
A gunman killed 19 children.
Comment imaginer, ne serait-ce qu'un instant?
Yet again, the world's attention is on guns and mass murder in America. In 2020, 45,000 people died in gun violence in the U.S. More than half were suicides, but 19,000 were murders, the most since 1968. While Central and South America lead the world in gun deaths, the U.S. has far higher rates than Canada, Europe, or Asia, which have much stricter gun laws.
Why? They have mental health problems. They have domestic disputes in other countries.
But America has more guns than people, nearly 120 for every 100 Americans. 393 million firearms nationwide. From the world's headlines to U.S. politicians asking what's become of us.
I think something is dying inside the soul of this nation when we accept this as the new normal.
From everyday Americans taking to social media to an NBA coach who doesn't want to talk about basketball.
We can't get numb to this. We can't sit here and just read about it and go, well, let's have a moment of silence.
America's friends and allies expressing deep concern.
La scuola elementare in Texas.
Pope Francis today said it's time to say enough to the indiscriminate trafficking of weapons. In 1996, Australia adopted very tough gun laws after a mass shooting left 35 people dead. New Zealand dramatically changed its own laws and bought back guns after 51 people were killed at 2 mosques in 2019.
When we saw something like that happen, everyone said never again.
After a gunman in Scotland killed 16 children and their teacher in 1996, the UK quickly banned nearly all handguns. NBC's senior international correspondent Keir Simmons says guns are simply not part of British culture.
You are the father of 2 daughters. I'm the father of 2 daughters. Do your children worry about the potential for a mass shooting in their school?
I feel like on this, Tom, we're speaking different languages. My kids don't worry about the dangers of going to school. There's no worries about whether or not someone with a gun, someone with an automatic weapon is going to walk in to my kids' school in the UK.
You are the ones we turn to, yet on this issue, America is one of the most backward places in the world.
Tonight, as always, the world is watching. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
Up next, as we continue tonight, how parents of school-aged children across the country are talking about the news of this attack with their families tonight. For parents of school children across the country, this was a difficult day as they tried to process what happened here in Texas and try to explain it to their children. Stephanie Goss spoke with some of them.
This morning, with the horror of another school shooting on their minds, parents had to wake up and do what they normally do on a Wednesday, get their kids out the door for school.
Wondering how I was going to tell my children about what they were going to hear in school and on the news today, and how to not frighten them.
They got on the bus and I sat here and cried, wondering if they'll come home.
We lingered a bit longer at home, hugged a bit tighter at drop-off, and after I made sure they were inside, sat in my car and prayed a little more specifically for their safe return to my arms tonight.
I smelled his head, and I felt his cheek next to mine, and I thought, how lucky am I that I get to do that this morning when so many families in Texas don't? And how unlucky am I that I live in a country that allows this to keep happening?
I'm panicking. I'm scared. I'm double thinking myself, should I send them or should I not?
I tell myself that my two kids, Clara and Charlie, are two of tens of millions, and today probably won't be the day I win the worst lottery that there ever was.
Teacher Matt Dix also pledges this to his students.
I will stand between you and whatever bad thing has come into our school.
One mom in Arkansas couldn't even send her son to school today.
They did place extra police officers around the campuses today, but I still felt more comfortable keeping him home with me.
In some places, the fear runs even deeper because they were victims of a school shooting themselves, like in Parkland, Florida.
It jogs up the memories of our own tragedy, and it creates a level of fear and uncertainty in our communities.
And then there are the parents in Uvalde itself.
My 5-year-old did go to school, and having to explain to him why he had to hide under his desk for half of the day is very hard. He can't comprehend it. He just said that he was happy that him and his best friend Lewis were safe.
Being safe at school is something kids and their parents should be able to take for granted. But they don't. Not in this country. Not anymore. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News.
And up next for us tonight, inside a primary night full of surprises and some pivotal elections. Today marks 2 years since another event that shocked the country, the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer. On today's anniversary, President Biden signed an executive order on police reform. It creates a national registry of officers fired for misconduct and bans federal officers from using chokeholds unless deadly force is authorized. Also tonight, the results from the latest round of high-stakes primary elections and the setbacks for some of the candidates endorsed by former President Trump. Our Vaughn Hilliard now with that story.
Voters in Georgia on Tuesday decisively rejecting Donald Trump's endorsed candidates, the first major roadblocks to his efforts to maintain control of today's Republican Party.
Team Kemp has always been built from the grassroots up.
Governor Brian Kemp, who drew Trump's rage after certifying Joe Biden's 2020 win, handily defeated Trump-backed challenger David Perdue, who just days earlier tried to downplay his pending loss.
Tuesday, but I can't damn tell you, we're not down 30 points.
Instead, he lost by 50 points. Now, Kemp will square off with Democrat Stacey Abrams in a 2018 rematch.
Today is the beginning of the next phase of this campaign.
Georgia's Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and Attorney General Chris Carr, also to the chagrin of Trump, won their races outright.
The vast majority of Georgians are looking for honest people for elected office. Someone who would do their job, follow the law.
See you across the state, Alabama.
Next door, Congressman Mo Brooks is heading to Alabama's U.S. Senate runoff, rising from his thought to be political ashes after Trump dropped his endorsement earlier this spring.
No one has 100% influence.
Another sign that Republicans who have drawn Trump's scorn can still thrive. Though in Arkansas, Trump's former White House press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, securing the GOP's nomination for governor.
You know, when I worked at the White House, nobody ever cheered when I went up to the podium, so this is different.
And in Texas, George P. Bush losing his primary for Attorney General, marking an end to the Bush family dynasty, 70 years after patriarch Prescott Bush first entered public office.
And just this afternoon in Pennsylvania, the recount for that close GOP Senate race is formally beginning. Mehmet Oz currently leads David McCormick by less than 1,000 votes. Lester?
All right, Von Hilliard tonight. Thanks. We're back in a moment with a final thought from Texas. Finally tonight, as the school massacre here in Uvalde takes its place among the rankings of these kinds of tragedies, let's not forget that the enormity of the losses can never be adequately measured or reflected by just numbers. With 19 students and 2 teachers killed here in Uvalde, Texas, of all the gun violence in the U.S. this year, this shooting was indeed the deadliest one. Robb Elementary joins the list of Columbine, Sandy Hook, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and far too many others. It is, as we say, among the worst mass shootings in U.S. history. But we should resist the urge to rank these crimes, these heinous acts. When your loved one is murdered, when your innocent child is ripped away from you, when this tragedy finds its way to you, as it has found its way to the families of Littleton, Colorado, Newtown, Connecticut, Parkland, Florida, and now Uvalde, Texas. That is the worst one of them all. To all those who have lost the ones they love to this plague, we pray for you and for them. That's Nightly News for this Wednesday. I'll be back here reporting tomorrow night in this broadcast, and Savannah Guthrie anchors the Today Show live from here as well tomorrow. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Good night. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.